Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here representing TD Bank. This is TD Bank's 8th year supporting Global Fest and their Human Rights Forum. And each year, the speakers and topics bring together an even more dynamic group to share experiences, knowledge, and solutions to bring about change and create positive and safe communities. At TD, we share that commitment to creating positive communities where diversity is embraced and celebrated. For us, diversity is about more than being competitive and relevant to the communities that we serve. It's about building an organization where people do not feel excluded in any way, regardless of ethnicity, physical abilities or disabilities, gender, or sexual orientation. TD participates in many outreach efforts with the aim of recognizing, encouraging, and celebrating diversity and building long-term relationships with diverse communities which we serve. In Canada, we designate at least 15% of TD's giving to diversity-related organizations. So thank you, Global Fest, for giving us the opportunity to experience a bold and refreshing look at what it means to build inclusive communities. This afternoon, we're incredibly fortunate to have a distinct panel here to share their insights into cultural healing and how we can reconnect with lost heritage. Leading this panel is Dr. Helgi Eyford, clinical ethicist from the Alberta of Health Services. Dr. Eyford has worked in a number of roles, such as a school teacher in Colombia, a community development worker in Canadian Aboriginal communities, a university lecturer in Papua New Guinea, a program manager in Ukraine, a hospital inspector in Egypt, a training advisor in Yemen, a diversity educator with the Calgary Health Region, and a leadership development trainer in Calgary. He received his doctorate from the University of Calgary, focusing his thesis on how international medical graduates acculturate to Canada. Wow, that is quite an impressive resume and a diverse set of skills and experiences. I'm sure you're all eager to hear from him and the rest of the panel. So with no further ado, Dr. Helgi Eyford. There you are.
Thanks very much. Yeah, when I hear that, I always think that I still don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up. I worked for a number of years in Aboriginal communities on alcohol and drug abuse prevention. And we found that some of the most effective strategies to deal with that were cultural-based. It involved revisiting, re-articulating, reinventing strong culture that people could build their identity and chart a course in their life. So with that experience, I went to Papua New Guinea, where an even more traumatized people, 360 different languages and tribes who've been colonized and recolonized by every religious order in the world, it seems, who were taught to hate their own culture, their own mythologies. And I was giving this message from what I've learned from Aboriginal communities that culture is important, that culture is the foundation of your development, and you have to remember it, you have to articulate it. And the guy puts his hand up in the back, he says, "But teacher," and I love, that's my favorite title, "But teacher, we like chainsaws." And I thought that was a really interesting comment, because to be true to your culture, does that mean you have to go back to use stone tools and dress in bush material outfits? Or can you be a traditional person in the modern world? And it started a dialogue with that class and subsequent classes that articulating who you are is a very complex thing. And it's not just a retrospective, but it's also a forward-looking endeavor. It requires curiosity and courage, and I think probably above all, creativity, that you have to build a new culture, and you have to articulate it not often in rational or discursive ways. And there was a little comment at the end of this morning's session about the role of art. art has a huge role to play. What are the metaphors, the symbols that capture our vision of who we want to be and what feels right to us? So that said, I think we've got some people who've shown great courage and creativity and curiosity on our panel today. This afternoon, we're going to talk a more narrative approach. We're going to hear the personal stories of three really special individuals. So our first panelist, Art, is from Rwanda. Rwanda's probably, I have been told, the greatest slaughter of humans since the Holocaust. Now, and we've often, many of us have heard about it through the stories and the journey of Romeo Dallaire. But Art and his wife experienced this. Their family were killed in this genocide. And since coming to Canada, he's, without financial support, set up a Genocide Memorial Keepers Association. He was the president of that until 2013, and has a lot to share with us about his experience and the experience of the Rwandan community, both at home and at here. And I look forward to hearing about that story. So thanks. Come on up, Art.
They asked me to talk about how my community use cultural healing to reconnect with lost heritage. As I told to somebody who called me here, I said, this really a huge topic to talk about because it's our huge concern in my community. In Edmonton, we are about 3,000 people or survived the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. I don't know if we have already heard about that genocide. I told this person who want me to talk, so how do you want me to handle this? Because in my community we say, if you lose your community, you lose everything. You cannot survive with not your own culture, because you cannot live beside it. Because it's a huge topic to talk about in 15 minutes. Even if you give me the whole day, I won't finish. But I'm gonna do my best to give you an idea of what happened and how do we do here in Canada, specifically in Edmonton. So, before we go any further, I'm gonna talk about what we should know about Rwanda and the genocide against the Tutsi. Because many people heard about it, but they know almost nothing about it. First of all, I divided this presentation into 3 chapters. Before the colonization came to Rwanda, which means during and before that period, Rwanda was a kingdom with a history full of cultural values. 100% of our heritage was memorized by individuals and handed down from generation to the next. Of course, it was not printed out because we couldn't read and write at that time. The second big part is when the Rwanda turned from feudality to republic. That was in 1961, colonial occupation from Belgium. That's how we speak French in Rwanda, because before we were not speaking in French. We're speaking in local language. So every school, every church, every business, everything was in French. And we had to follow the French. If you know a little bit about Belgium, there is 2 big groups, but I don't know if they are ethnic or something, but let's say it's a social group. Il y a les Flamands, in French is the Flamands, et les Wallons. and they tried to copy what they left in their country to our own country. They came to Rwanda, and they bring the new issue of majority. That word was not existing even in our culture. And they say Hutu, Tutsi, they mixed up everything. They called ethnic group, which was not at all an ethnic group. It was a economic social group only. And then everybody was against everybody in that time, which took about 80 years maybe. And hatred raised in the country. Everybody was looking at his neighbor. We spoke one language, one religion. Everything was one. In one country, one king, one nation, one language. But since these people came to Rwanda, everything was divided in two. And we grow up in hatred. In French, we say déshumanisé, which is close to the English word saying déshumanization, calling people the snakes or cockroaches, stuff like that. And then we grow up in hatred like that. That's why we end up in 1994 in a huge genocide. They talk about 500 people died, 800, but we know for sure it's beyond 1 million people who died. And now, let's try to see the main topic here, how the survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi reconnect with lost heritage. And that's a big issue to us as living in this country. We have two groups here. We have the survivors living now inside Rwanda and many people living outside of Rwanda, like myself, like my community living in Edmonton. So now we're going to see how do we do that. Normally here, we're going to focus to genocide survivors living outside of Rwanda today, specifically those living in the city of Edmonton as a case study. Our community is very young and new in the city. It is so sad to see how we are melting now and getting lost in a multicultural society with no help. We need help to reconnect with our natural heritage, but there is no help. Now, let's see what we have in Edmonton. The majority of Rwandans living in Alberta are all found in the city of Edmonton. 99.9% are genocide survivors. Average age is close to 35 years. How do we integrate into Canadian society? We're going to see together how we do this. You see the group here, this group of people, 6 to 18, if we take a sample of 2,000 people, so 6 to 18 are about 60%. But inside these numbers, 60% are treated with school dropout. Why? Because they lack a role model in the community. There is no elders. I heard here Aboriginal community are very, very close to the way we live in our country. We go by elders. And we have none here. You can say, if you look at my face, I am an elder already, but if you see the next number, you want to see what is happening. 18, if 6 to 18 are about 6% of the community, and 60% among them are dropping school. Why? Because of the next one here. When you see 18 to 36, about 90% of our community, under 35, under 36. Where are they? Where do you find these guys? Less than 1% are in school, to college or university. What they do, you're going to find them in cheap labor somewhere. They make money in group homes, in factories, everywhere you want, you name it. You're going to ask them why you guys are not at school. And the answer is going to be straight. Why do you want me to go to school? Mama was at school, he died. Dad was engineer or doctor, he died. And he died for nothing, just because he's Tutsi. Why do you want me to go back to school again? And now, how can you figure out between the 18 to 36 is the hope of the community? But they are everywhere, in the drugs, on the street, in alcohol, smoking, not going to school at all. See, 1% is at school. But now, we're going to look at the next one, which is me and other few people between 36 to 55. We are only 4% of the community. So where are we? We are here, less than 0.5%. They have a decent income. Many survive on unstable jobs, like group homes, like I said, or whatever. Even though they hold degrees and PhDs and masters in everything. Why? Again, frustrations. You come here, you're not recognized as such, but you have a family to raise. You do the very first thing you meet on the street, like driving cab. I'm not minimizing driving cab as a profession, but you know what I'm talking about. Or delivering pizza, stuff like that. Why? Because kids have to eat. You don't mind, you're sure they are pretty safe home, but home and safety, it is not enough. They have to eat. And what happens in the family, the dad who used to be, let's say, a doctor, a home provider in our culture, and now he's never home. You stay home with the kids, they won't eat. Let's say he got a young man who's 16 or 17. He come back home and say, where have you been? And they're going to say, Dad, what are you asking? Why do you ask me what you have been? It's my business, not yours. That's losing your culture, because in our culture it doesn't exist. When your dad speak, you sit down and you listen. Here, when you see this second part here, if you see this flashing thing, the stop here, if somebody should help, if there's any government, any institution want to help our community to go through the trauma, you're gonna try to stop this leaking here. If we don't stop this leaking, it comes to everybody, not just to our community. Maybe you don't know, but if these guys, 9% of these guys go to the street, it comes back to your backyard. From the street to your backyard straight. The government doesn't invest in here, but they're gonna be investing in penitentiary institutions. And the police and everybody, the public safety is talking about here. The Rwandese community, before this happens, they were not known by the police. Now we are seeing people on the street, in penitentiaries, and everywhere, you name it. You know what happened when the people... Now, before I run out of my time, 2 minutes, thank you. Now, how do we manage to reconnect with our lost heritage? Outside of two groups, to show you how we do it. Outside of Canada, like here in Alberta here, we try to organize genocide commemoration vigils. We remember and share our pain because Confiding in people we trust is part of our cultural heritage. So you won't see any Rwandese consulting psychologist, for example. As we learned in your English, beautiful English language, you never say never. But in our culture, we don't consult psychologists even if we need them. So why not? I don't have an answer. Now, what is happening inside Rwanda then? What makes the difference is they do the same, so organizing genocide commemorations, but they also have Gacaca Court, which is a traditional grass trial. Genocide survivors and people guilty of the crime are seated together to talk about before witnesses. This is a unique therapy to our cultural legacy that has proven its worth, allowing Rwandans to live together again despite the tragedy that took over 1 million lives in 3 months. That's how Rwandans live peacefully together again today, and that's how Rwandans try to do not live in their past. So I wish I could have 1 year to talk about this, but I thank really people who organize this festival, because we really need to reconnect with culture, otherwise we are completely lost. I end up on this one in French. Si vous n'avez pas... The past is like a lamp placed at the entrance of the future to dispel the darkness that hides it. I tried to translate from French, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Thank you very much.
All right, so our next speaker, Anthony Chim, was born in Vietnam, immigrated to Canada as a teenager, experienced educator, school administrator in southern Alberta, former principal of the 3rd Academy North and principal of the new Kanata Academy, and the executive director of the Calgary Vietnamese Television. Thanks very much for being here, and you can be there or be here, whatever works for you.
Oh, Sherry, please kill me. Stop that, Anthony. You're still being so dramatic. Dramatic? Can you believe that? Oh, yeah, she's right. My BFFE, best friend forever and eternity. Sherry Wood from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Anybody from Winnipeg? It's a very cold place. And only she can handle my extreme mood swing, just like a yo-yo. And at that very moment, I felt really down. Anthony, you know what? I will not kill you unless you give me $1 million. Okay, fine, I will sell myself. But nobody will buy you because you're so whippy and whiny. So just smarten up. And you should do something called recharge your happiness. I'm not a phone. Exactly. People are not objects. And therefore, people are so rechargeable. Let's charge your happiness now. Oh, Cheryl's very dramatic as well. Okay, fine. What should you do? So now you should reflect on one thing that you're so grateful for. At that very moment, ladies and gentlemen, I began to reflect on the journey of 40 years ago when our Vietnamese people left the country after the communists took over the southern Vietnam. As many of you have known already, people took absolutely any means to leave the country. Some, lucky like me, I would take the airplane, but we had to leave everything behind. Some took the boat. They formerly known as boat people, weathering absolutely everything on the Pacific Ocean, being raped, being killed, being mistreated, and you name it. And finally, we made it to the third country. Because the second country would be Indonesia or Malaysia, the second country that the boat people landed before being accepted to the third country like Canada or USA. So reflecting on that, I just feel, oh, how can our people recharge our happiness readily? when they have such a dramatic experience like that. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to walk away with a formula that I came up with. I call it the RCB, not the RBC, okay, because TD is sponsoring this event. So I have to be very, very tasteful. So the R stands for reflection. The C stands for celebration. And the B stands for build or building. So let's reflect. As I mentioned, when I first came to Canada, the first moment I opened my mouth, people asked me to repeat myself 10 times. And I was so offended, right? I just say, 6? So what do you mean by that? And I even say, I want to fax something. People say, Anthony, don't swear. Excuse me. I'm a good boy. I don't swear, right? That was very difficult. And I remember the time when I did a fantastic presentation, the oral presentation, and my vice principal happened to be at that very moment, and he just said, oh, Anthony, you are the best. Really? That means I'm going to get the best mark? And I got my marks back, 87%. That was fine. But I looked at another group, 95. I was livid. Can you believe that? I was the best, right? And I was already 87 and 90, and they got 95. So I protested. Oh my God, Anthony Chim or Antonio after 6 o'clock. It's very, very vocal. And I protested. It's like, Miss, what's happened to my other 13%? Because you have an accent. Can you show me the rubric? What's the accent? Okay, miss, I'm not here to debate with you. You have to return to me that 13%. Otherwise, I would talk to Mr. Morgan because he told me I was the best. Happy? Happy! You stole me 13% and you returned it to me. You see me happy? From that moment on, ladies and gentlemen, I swore to myself that if one day, if I ever became a teacher, I would never take away 1 single percent from my immigrant kids. Let's go the accent, let's go the appearance, let's go any experiences. Recharge our happiness. How could I recharge my happiness when my teacher, who's supposed to help me to recharge my happiness, treat me that way? Ignorance, discrimination, whatever the term we came up with, I did not know to understand. I didn't want to understand. I moved on, and I became a teacher. Oh my gosh, before I became a teacher, my accent came back and haunted me. I was told that I should be a teacher because of my accent. Can you believe that? Heck with that, I became a teacher and I became a school principal. Recharging your happiness. How can you recharge that? When people just, step in your way like that. I wasn't alone, ladies and gentlemen. My parents once owned a restaurant in Vietnam. And they came here, they lost absolutely everything, and they couldn't speak English, so they had to work for a restaurant, of course a 5-star one, Chateau Lake Louise, to raise all of us. I know my doctor friends who couldn't speak English and have to drive taxis. You can relate to that already. And humorously, he did demonstrate his, PhD degree in front of the taxi cabs with a strong hope that a doctor driver would have more tips. And then go on and on, reflecting on our Vietnamese community did recharge our happiness quite nicely in the past 40 years. Looking around, I'm so happy to celebrate the present. Presently, we have a huge Vietnamese community in Alberta with about 50,000 people. With all of the Vietnamese schools, we have about 1 million Vietnamese restaurants. You know that already. And nails bars, ladies. Yeah, we have lots of Vietnamese nail bars owned by the Vietnamese people as well. And then we have a Vietnamese television program produced by me, right? I'm on TV 3 times a week. Now will be 4 times in September. So you can see my smiley face on TV if you want to. And we have lots of doctors, lawyers, constable. We have the first. We have the first senator, Senator No, You probably know him already. With the first constable, Mr. Andy Bao Nguyen, who just ran for the MLA recently. He's the first Vietnamese constable. And of course, you have me, the first very cute Vietnamese-born principal in town. Celebrating. It's come from a very small thing. That's what we learned from my parents and my community member. We have to celebrate. Otherwise, you just reflect on the past too negatively. Okay, we have to move on. Moving on doesn't mean giving up. We never give up our culture. Every single year, we still celebrate lots of culture galas. We wear our traditional costumes, we invite everyone to attend our special events. And hosting a TV show, as I'm doing right now, is what the way to reconnect with our lost heritage. In fact, our heritage never be lost. That's something that I'm really proud of. Regardless of adversities, and I believe that adversities create opportunities for us to grow together as a whole community. And we have grown a lot. So now, let's talk about build the future. What can we build? We have to build with hope. I strongly believe that in all darkness, there is light. Maybe it is not so bright, but in all darkness, there is light. The situation can be so dark. We lost our country. We lost our language sometimes because we're being forced to speak another language. We lost our jobs. We're no longer doctors, lawyers, MLAs, MPs, prime minister, minister, president, and so on. But we still ourselves. As long as we still have the heart that is striving to seek light every single day, we should find that darkness is not that scary. And today, I want to talk with you about the past, not too bitter about how communist government mistreated all of us after they took over the country so that we didn't have a better choice by leaving the country. We would not say, down with the communists. I would not jump up and down and do that. Okay, I would do it sometime outside. But in here, I want you to inspire something. Because adversities, atrocities can happen to us anytime, ladies and gentlemen. Some of you are very fortunate for not having gone through what we have gone already. Some of you may have a very blessed life by not facing with any adversities like our severe adversities. However, you can help us to build the future by educating yourself and each other by saying that Vietnamese people, or like Rwandan people, Chinese, Filipino, and so on, they are people. They are Canadians. You should treat them with respect. And respect, I disagree that respect should be earned. No, respect is automatic. But you have to earn respect. And respect, no matter what. And that's what I keep teaching my students. Respect is something automatic. It's like breathing. Okay? And second thing, attend our event. When we invite you to a special event, come, jump up and down, go to special forum, human rights forum like this. It's wonderful already. Go to Global Fest, sit down, watching the fireworks, and say, Yahoo, we live in a multicultural country. Let's celebrate it. So that's something you can help to build. And when you see an applicant like Anthony Chim apply for a job, please do not shut us away. I know that for a fact. Some people did that. That you're looking for some tall, white, sexy, whatever candidate. And that is wrong. I'm not saying that to generalize. It's happened. So just give us the opportunity to serve your organization and your country. And finally, I have to say that I'm very blessed to live in Canada. Since I was devastated when I left Vietnam, my beloved country, leaving behind the glorious sunset and sunrise that I grew up in an oceanic city, Nam Vung Tau, leaving all of the friends, leaving all of the memories behind. I came to Canada with a lot of tears and grew up with a lot of tears. But with my community, especially my parents, and I know my dad, who just passed away last month, watching me right now, and he's really proud of the fact that his son has traveled to 102 countries. And recently, I just came back from the States, finishing 50 states of America, plus Washington, D.C., plus Puerto Rico, plus U.S. Virgin Islands. Can you believe that? And who gave it to me? Canada. I have to credit to Canada. With the Canadian passport, we can build that future. The future of a traveler, the future of a person who can travel the inner journey and give back to the community. And I want you to be like that as well. So ladies and gentlemen, In all darkness, there is bright. I know we've been through lots of darkness together, but maybe the light is not so bright. But believe with me, in all darkness, there is light. Thank you.
And to round out the trio here, we have Victoria Norris, a Cree mother of 3 adult children and a very proud grandmother of a 9-year-old girl. Born in Edmonton, Grand Prairie Composite High School. There's a date here, but I won't repeat it. Not that it doesn't seem to be, it's not a bad date. Been in Calgary for 30 years and has worked with the federal government for 14 years, and that's a cultural experience on its own, I would imagine. She's chair of the Federal Aboriginal Committee and is the Aboriginal representative of the Public Service Alliance Canada Human Rights Committee. So great for you to be here, and I see you've brought more than the words to communicate your message from your chair.
Yes, thank you. I just want to thank my union, Public Service Alliance of Canada. You guys rock. You've really backed Aboriginal community in the federal public service. And thank you for recommending that I have this opportunity to come and talk about my Métis history and culture in this venue. First of all, I'd like to ask the audience, how many people know what Métis is? Can you raise your hands? Wow, that's a lot better than I expected. Métis in the original is a French word, and it means mix, a mix of European and Aboriginal culture. Like my great-great-grandfather that came over from the Orkneys in Scotland and married my great-great-grandmother who was a Cree woman. And our family has been Métis ever since for many generations. And the interesting thing about Métis is, I don't know if you know, as there seems to be a lot of newcomers to Canada here today, is that to be educated about the Métis culture. And that it gets put on the back burner a lot. A lot of people don't know who Métis are, but it is coming more to the forefront through education, but it's been a long time in coming. I just want you to know that I'm just sharing my own perspective. I am not a professional in this field, and I'm not saying that I have all knowledge in this area, but I bring my own perspective and my truth to you. And I'm always willing to learn from anybody else who has more to share with me, because we have a fantastic, fascinating history in Canada. Métis people, we call ourselves the first true Canadians. Please hear me out. The First Nations people were here first for thousands and thousands of years. We will never doubt that fact. And they brought their own flag, and that's the flag staff that's been here for thousands of years. And does anybody here know who made the first flag here in Canadian soil? It was the Métis people. And I just want you to take a look at my flag here. Has anybody seen this before? There's even fewer. But this was the first flag created and made in Canada. It's got the infinity sign here, and it means two cultures mixing together and staying together forever. And the Métis first flew this flag in 1816, actually at the Battle of Seven Oaks, which happened in Canada in 1816. And it was the Métis people that fought against the Hudson's Bay Company, unfortunately. And we were actually the Métis were the first people to strike in Canada, just to let you know. And that we're celebrating the 200th anniversary of our Métis flag in 2016 next year. So hope when you see that flag that you realize what it is and where it comes from, and help me take pride in my culture, because you know what? Pride in my culture cannot come just from my community anymore. We have become a very small dot and speck on the earth in Canadian society. We need everyone to come on board and recognize who we are and where we come from and take pride in our culture and heritage with us. I just want you to know that Métis people is just one of the groups that come under the umbrella word of Aboriginal in Canada. And there's First Nations, there's Métis, and there's Inuit. So we are one of those Aboriginal people groups. We have not always been accepted by First Nation society or European society, but we create our own distinct and unique cultures, traditions, and our language is something called Michif. Unfortunately, I have lost all the languages that I should be speaking today because of a terrible oppression and racism that was against my family from a young age. My grandmother did not want us suffering that kind of racism so that we could grow up hopefully in a healthier Canadian society. But at the time, it was devastating on our family. There are many names of the Métis people. One of them is, can anybody guess? Children of the fur trade. This is my fox fur. I keep them handy. I always remember I come from a long time of fur traders and fur trappers. Another name for our Métis people, I'm just going to get up and show you some beadwork here, is, and I just want you to know that we are distinct and unique from First Nations cultures. You see the design of the flower on here? It's unique from most Aboriginal people groups in Canada. First Nations usually bead with geometric designs. It was the Métis people that came with their European ancestors with embroidery that transferred into beadwork, and we are now called also the flower beadwork people. Unfortunately, all our names are not good for the Métis people. The next name for our people is called the Forgotten People. Way back in the 1800s, when the Hudson's Bay Company had to relinquish the land back to the British Crown, the British Crown did not recognize any land that belonged to the Métis. Métis had earned much land from the Hudson's Bay Company by working for it for thousands of years. But when the new government came in, they did not recognize any of that land. And so to this day, the Métis people have no homeland, no land considered their own, like you would see First Nations reserves. There's none of that for Métis people. And to this day, one of the names that we have is the Forgotten People. Another name that we have is the Road Allowance people. So we have suffered tremendously throughout the generations. We were not welcome on Native reservations. We were not welcome in mainstream Canadian society because we were an Indigenous culture. A lot of our people were called road allowance people as they were squatting on land that was Crown land that was set aside for a road allowance. And when the town got sick of the Métis there, they would just go in and burn down their houses and the Métis would move on. And so we have a sad legacy of being starting off with the Hudson's Bay Company being the dominant force of the main economics in Canada by being the middleman for the Hudson's Bay Trading Company. 80% of the staff of the Hudson's Bay Company at that time were Métis. And if a European man moved to Canada and he married a Métis wife, he stepped up in society. And I give you my case in point is Isabella Lougheed. When she married her husband, she was the one that provided status for him. The Métis woman brought him up in society. But it's so sad how the tide has turned and the tables have changed. And unfortunately, over time, because of the European settlers wanting to come in and take over, Métis have lost that place in Canadian society. One thing about the Métis is that we are unique in that we are the only mixed race of people recognized by all levels of our government. And I just find that absolutely fascinating, and that we are our own unique, distinct Indigenous culture. My story is that I had no idea that I was suffering the effects of the loss of culture and heritage, and until I began to question why was my community suffering so many social ills? Why was my dad an alcoholic? Why was there family violence and domestic violence in every Native home that I knew? Why, when I went to school, I was treated poorly? Why was I teased about being Native? Why was I teased about being Métis? Why was I called a wagon burner? Why did all these things have to happen to me? And statistics sadly continue to show Aboriginal communities have the highest rate of suicide, diabetes, incarcerations, addictions, and lateral violence. And I didn't know why. My parents couldn't articulate why. We were just living a horrific life. And we cried many, many tears since I was a young child. And for my healing, I had to look back to gain understanding on the psychological effects of colonization and the intergenerational trauma suffered by residential school survivors and their families, and the effects of racism and oppression on the health of Métis people. I discovered that all these ill effects are all consequences of lost community and a sense of belonging, a loss of pride in who we are caused by racism. Not all Métis suffered this loss, but too many of us have been alienated by being taken away from our people and culture, or shamed by mainstream Canadians who did not understand our uniqueness. Much like the story of the ugly duckling, so many of us suffered low self-esteem for years, not knowing who we are, until we reconnected with our heritage and blossomed into the beautiful Métis swan we actually are. How do we heal from this and become who we are and take our rightful place in Canadian society? In my perspective, I believe it takes all Canadians participating together to ensure successful outcomes for cultural healing and restoring lost heritage. It's funny because I hear that general theme amongst all of us who are trying to heal culturally. Individual Métis have to take initiative. The Métis community needs to be inclusive and mainstream society addressing those stereotypes that are roadblocks to restoring lost heritage, such as racism. According to the findings of Dr. Cheryl Curry, assistant professor at the Health Sciences Center at the University of Lethbridge, those who practice their culture suffer more racism than those who do not. The government and mainstream Canadians can assist by becoming educated. Having accurate Métis history and the role of Métis people played in the development of Canada taught in Canadian schools. And knowledge and celebrate our culture with us at Métis Week and National Aboriginal Day. Recognize our flag in the 2016 celebrations and our 200th year of the Infinity flag. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission has opened up conversations with mainstream Canadians that had no idea of the genocide suffered by Aboriginal people, including the Métis. It has been empowering and validating experience to hear Canadians acknowledge their lack of knowledge and understanding in this area and showing concern for the effects of residential schools. Mainstream Canadian businesses such as Fort Edmonton, I'm very proud that I was up there to witness the signing of a memorandum of understanding with the Métis Nation of Alberta to ensure accurate Métis history and culture are taught. Heritage Park also provides Métis history out of the Hudson's Bay Fort, and one of the first settlers in Calgary, the Livingston family, are taught out of Heritage Park now. And just to let you know, that's part of my healing is I need to talk about my culture and history, and that's a picture of me. I was one of the first Aboriginal interpreters at Heritage Park. They started off teaching Blackfoot history and culture, which is great because we are living in historical Blackfoot territory, all of southern Alberta, but now they're moving on into teaching Métis culture and history there too. It's my privilege to articulate that information to newcomers and Métis alike. I'm bringing a sense of pride to our Métis by having our culture and history celebrated is important in this way and bringing knowledge to Canadians and international guests. And two, the Métis Nation of Alberta continues to offer cultural teaching in order to restore lost heritage by offering Métis gatherings and events such as Cypress Hills, teaching jigging and capote making and our cultural music with the fiddle. The Métis Nation of Alberta has a ministry called Culture and Recreation who provide genealogical information and photos to support and promote culture continuity and longevity. The MNA hosts a number of community gatherings, such as teaching about the Métis wintering site near Tail Creek, Alberta, Métis Crossing Historical Site near Victoria Historical Métis Community. And we're also involved with the Child and Family Human Services to develop culturally appropriate plans for Métis children in care and to ensure Métis children in care obtain registration with the Métis Nation. There's a whole host of other things. There's Batoche Métis Days in Saskatchewan where we celebrate our heritage every year. But individual members are the backbone of our community and each person has the opportunity to connect with our Métis culture. Those born and raised in the community and culture need to be a welcoming committee, encouraging those who are seeking to be restored and reconnected. It can be scary and intimidating experience reaching out to learn about who you are. Fear of rejection and humiliation can easily thwart a curious newcomer to learn more about their heritage. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share Métis history and culture in my part-time job at Heritage Park as an Hudson's Bay Company interpreter. It was our great leader, Louis Riel, who said, "My people will sleep for 100 years, but when they wake, it will be the artists who bring their spirit back." This is an accurate prophecy in my life. Although I was proud being Métis at a young age, a divorce in my family alienated me from my Métis culture. When I was 16 years old, I visited my cousin who teased me saying, "You're Métis and you don't even know how to jig?" I was so ashamed and humiliated. I felt alienated that I didn't know my culture. I have since made it a priority to know my culture, history, and traditions, and to teach Métis history and culture at Heritage Park. I learned how to jig. I am dancing with the Calgary Métis Star Dancers. I have danced in the Calgary Stampede for the last 3 years, and so proud to share my culture in front of the whole city. These events bring strong feelings of pride in who I am as a valuable member of my community with a strong sense of belonging. I want to thank Global Fest for giving a voice to the Métis people in acknowledging historical trauma and recognizing that we are on our healing journey. There is so much to learn from the past, but we cannot allow past hurts to smolder and destroy today. Instead, we can use our experiences to move forward and to make healthier and more caring choices than ever before. Cultural healing and restoring lost heritage creates community and healthy, happy families. I thank all those involved in working towards a better future for our Métis Nation. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for sharing your stories. It takes a degree of courage and also for sticking exactly on time. Yeah, I didn't have to interrupt a single person. I'm going to want to open it up for questions right now, but first I want to thank Art for his helping. There was a 15-minute warning. You see, it was perfect for the Tutsi and Hutu story. I thought it was really interesting how he connected the conflict back to the colonial history and what the effect of the colonization had on their ability to handle disputes. And I was really interested in the modern court that exists back there, maybe regaining some of those traditional problem-solving things. That's wonderful. And Anthony, thanks for the RCB, the reflection, the celebration and building. And sorry about the 13% you lost on the accent there. And lastly, I mean, thank you very much for the great statement of Métis culture. And I was struck by what was said because John Ralston Saul, in a book, Canada's premier philosopher, married to Adrienne Clarkson, our former Governor General of Canada, has written a book called A Fair Country. And there he says, we are not a country derived from the English and the French, but we are a Métis country because the Métis and the Aboriginal cultures, they're the ones that welcome the diversity. They're the ones that said we can create something together. And I thought that was a real powerful personal statement of what John Ralston Saul has also said. And I think it's a real challenge for all of us who are Canadians to see our country as an Aboriginal country, and that all our values, our vision of who we want to be is rooted in the history that the Europeans and the Aboriginals created together and the values that they have built around our country. So thanks very much for that. So let's open it up for some questions.
Is everyone in the room aware that we all live under an Indian Act right now, which means that a whole group of people are being oppressed? And I pointed out, because this is supposed to be a human rights forum and talking about the ending of racism, yet everyone in this room is benefiting from the Indian Act right now.
I'm not an expert in the Indian Act, but it is probably the most racist piece of legislation on the face of the earth today. And it's very unfortunate that Canadian Aboriginals have to suffer in this way. However, I'm the first to tell you, I don't know what the answer is. Because on the one hand, the racist legislation who call us Indians, which is a wrong name for us in the beginning, and the federal government still insists on using that term. And we are not Indians. In fact, people from India are greatly offended that we are called Indians because they know we are not. And I don't know what the answer is, because in the Indian Act comes all the laws and legislations regarding reservations, reserves, and Indian land and all that kind of stuff. It's not good, it's not perfect, it's very bad, I have to say. It totally needs to be revamped, but I don't know where we could even start. There's probably lots of people that have spent their whole lifetime in law and reading the Indian Act that wouldn't even have the answers still to this day. Thank you.
I can add to that. I believe that nothing can be changed unless being faced. We have to face it. And as a school principal, I have learned a great deal about this act, and I strongly disagree with you. The name itself is extremely problematic. So I urge all of you, please contact your MLA, your MP, Prime Minister, whoever can make the decision of changing the name, make the petition, and we Vietnamese people can sign as well.
Changing name is the beginning of the worst scenario. I told you how it happened in Rwanda, calling people snakes and cockroaches. So my name is Arthemon. I was not supposed to be Arthemon because Arthemon is a French name. I was born black Rwandans, but they gave mine a name and took away my real name, give me another one, and from then, little by little, they get there to the genocide. So yes, I agree with other people. They should fight, not change the name.
So my question is directed to Mr. Rurangwa. I was wondering if you could speak into more detail about the Gakaka court trials and how it functions, and maybe perhaps the forgiveness involved in that process.
Your question you're asking is a huge one because nobody understands from outside of Rwanda because it's a deep cultural way we do that. Grass trial, people sit down, as I said, in a few words. Even if somebody came up and say, you know what, I killed your dad and your mom and your brothers. You look at him, you really did? Yes, I did, and I'm sorry. Do you believe I'm sorry is enough? It cannot be. So what I can tell you is, after the genocide that took away 1.5 million of Tutsi, the guilty people were about half of that number. Let's say maybe 500,000 people were guilty. Rwanda is a poor country, but let's take Canada, a rich country. Do you think they can trial 500,000 of people? I don't think so. So that's the reason why we went back to our roots. And the government took the guilty people, let's say 500 people, and they divided in 3 groups. If you were leaders in the country, the leaders, and they go by responsibility in the genocide. But the people, because the leader can tell people, you guys go and kill this village, everybody. If you are of those guys who are leading people to kill, you cannot be tried and prosecuted on that cultural way. You go to official, regular one. But the people who just follow the rulers, yes, they are treated in a village, in a grassroots. Because they could not try everybody the civil way, the right way we do that. I don't know if I respond, but if we need more information, you can talk to me later. I'm going to give you the link, the book, everything you can read. But it has been proven working in Rwanda. Otherwise, there would be no more Rwanda in now, as we talk. Everybody would be again fighting and fire everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Put your hand up if you want to speak sometime. I'll put your face down here.
Can one of the problems with the correcting or changing the Indian Act be because of the British North America Act that started? In other words, we have a cultural problem of the barrier in trying to correct some of that.
Yeah. The British North America Act was debated in one afternoon in the British Parliament alongside a dog licensing legislation in London. That's how important it was for the Brits at the time. It's an interesting historical anomaly. Any comments on the British North America Act?
As I mentioned, like doesn't matter which act in the past has created. If the act is unfair to the present people, they would have to stand up and fight for it. Okay, so nothing written in stone, right? Something can be appropriate in the past, but it's not appropriate for the present. And then we have to stand up because we are the people of the present, the one who create all past, right? So we live our life. So wherever we feel comfortable, go for it.
Is there any assistance in financial aspect for low-income women?
Is there any financial assistance for low-income women?
There are lots of assistance, like for example, carry transit. Like if you have like the low income T4 slip, you can apply for subsidy as well. Same thing as healthcare, for example, and Blue Cross, so many other things. Even the school, you can apply for subsidy for the school fees if you cannot afford it, because education is not a privilege in Canada, it's a right. So I think Canada is the right place for not only for women with low income, but any gender with the low income. Make sure that you have the T4 slip to prove that you have low income, okay?
But I believe the challenge of reenacting a culture for people who are culturally displaced from their original culture or homes is part of the process. I know it's fraught with difficulties, but Canada's multiculturalism should provide the fabric for allowing people who are culturally displaced to reenact their culture, beyond the symbolism that comes from commemorations, national days, and things like that. I wonder whether the panelists, in their own efforts, have initiated any efforts to see beyond the policy of multiculturalism, is there anything beyond that the system is doing to allow people to create the institutions of their culture? Because culture is not simply the symbolism, but it is the institutions that allow people to connect and to have hope in the way they relate within their own culture.
I'd actually like to speak to that. Just a couple of facts that, from an Aboriginal perspective, we welcome multiculturalism. However, some of the sad facts about Aboriginal people in Canada is that if you talk to Alberta Human Rights, Aboriginal people still do not access human rights in Alberta because of the long stereotypes that have been held in Canada for so long. And until, I believe, we address those issues among our Aboriginal people, I don't think that it's going to be that easy for multiculturalism to go beyond the barriers of just plain or just expressing your culture in events and stuff like that. Because even our Aboriginal people are not recognized, and I don't know if most people know, little things like it was against the law for a First Nations man or woman to wear Aboriginal clothing. And Aboriginal people did not vote in Canada until 1960. So we're talking about long-stem stereotypes that have been going along in Canada for a long, long time that we have been dealing with as Aboriginal people. So we welcome the change, and we welcome hopefully the changing in the multicultural, but we hope that we would look at First Nations and Aboriginal people in Canada and heal that first as First Canadians and work on multiculturalism at the same time. Thank you.
It's very difficult. You're raising a very good question, but it's not all necessarily easy to go through, because we know a lot of organizations around here trying to help through the community to feel home. I know a name. I'm not promoting anybody, but there is an organization I saw in Edmonton. I saw the sign on the wall. It's called Changing Together. It's full of meaning. But when you cross the door, you go inside, what do you think they have to change people together? Because it's easy to say, like the gentleman here said, there is a light in the darkness. Actually, there is no light in the darkness. There is no darkness if we have a light. That I would put it the reverse way. Because no matter how big dark you have, darkness around, just one flash take away everything. That flashlight will be just the willing to changing together. With no support, you cannot make it through. Because we have a lot of barriers around. Language, means, and the cultural way. Canadian people living alone, I would say. Maybe I don't know if I have a time to make a comment. I remember myself when I first came to Canada. I was in Quebec and speaking French. And Quebecois were surprised to see me, a black guy, speaking French. And just my neighbor right there, I was living on a 3rd floor. In my culture, usually we go in the morning, you ask the neighbor, how are you? How was your night? How are you doing? I did the same. Knocked to the door. My neighbor, he opened the door, and I saw a black guy behind his door. And I said, what do you want? But he spoke in English, and I was not speaking English at all. I was speaking French. I said in French, because I knew I am in Quebec, I supposed to speak in French. I said, j'étais ici juste pour dire bonjour. And he slammed back the door, but went downstairs and in the garden on the floor, told everybody, did you know, I saw a black guy and he speaks French. And everybody came to me. They asked me, you speak French? I said, yeah, I do speak French. But how long have you been here? I said, 2 days, I guess. And they told me, 2 days? Yeah. 2 days and you speak French. I say, I was surprised by the question, and I answered, yes. I say, can you learn speaking French in 2 days? I say, I am the first black you saw, and I don't know how black people are fast learners. 2 days are enough for me to speak French. And the surprising stuff is he believed me. That's from there, I'm talking to you. When changing together is not from there, just to your neighbor. How are you going to change everything? Maybe I can go beyond of that, but that will be enough to tell you how it would be really difficult to change people.
Well, like for me, I would love to go back to my formula, the RCB formula. I think that will definitely happen from home. Like if every day you and your children sit down together, reflect on your day, and if your children still continue to speak the language, whatever your first language is, and to me that is a celebration already. If they eat the food, if I see my children or my nieces and nephew eating Vietnamese food without feeling, stinky about the fish sauce, I celebrate, that. I mean, because the heritage comes from very small things. And even better, if you can eat, the balut, the balut? That's yucky, like duck or chicken, that's even better. And if they're willing to go to the special events, and I insist special events are very important because they bring people together, and something beyond that would be great as well. And then we just tell them, you know what, let's build together. We live in the multicultural society, but I believe in the mosaic theory. That means you can be yourself, and yet you can stand side by side with others without losing your heritage. We can talk much more about this, but I believe that with the RCB formula, I think we can turn multiculturalism in our advantage, not our disadvantage.
Yeah, I want to thank you for your answers. Just wanted to put it in context, in the context of the presentation from Mr. Rurangwa. You gave a demographic. 6 to 18 are a population, a demographic we are losing culturally, and we are losing them in terms of their social progress. The reason I'm asking about the multiculturalism is because the reality is that this is a demographic that the cultures that they ought to belong to, that they ought to reconnect to, are losing them. So in the final analysis, we are sitting here chasing a mirage in this discourse because we are losing the demographic that is tomorrow's generation of people that will need to connect to their culture. Now, if multiculturalism doesn't provide the concrete answers for that, then I do not know where the answers will come from. But as long as we still symbolically pay homage to culture, we are not doing as much as ought to be done. So it's, this is the question that I wanted addressed.
Maybe you're right. But what I can say about that, I brought it on the table but because I don't have the answer. And I know for sure what we say is real. and it's right. But I wish I could be the Premier of Canada. I would change it the same day, because it's possible to change it.
Well, I think there's a seat open in Edmonton as of last night. For this.
Yeah, exactly. We're losing that generation, because you are from we are from same side of this world. You know what I'm talking about. In my culture, I have 3 kids, for example. I'm gonna give a personal example. I have 3 kids, 32, 27, and 20. What happens is, as I said, when I came here, they were young. The way I grow up in my own family, when dad say, come here, I go to him, and I listen to him. Now, when I tell, maybe I give my own kids necessarily not the right picture, but because they not behaving maybe not that way. But most of the kids we have of the age you talked about, the dad say, come here. The right answer gonna be, why? And did you do this? You see, mind your business. This is the language you never had in your country. Never in mine. And when you go tomorrow, after tomorrow, the dad is not heard, the guy gonna be a fight home all the time. You're gonna end up in divorce in the family. And after divorcing, where are the kids? On the street. What are they doing? You know what they're doing. I still remember from back what I've done in the past. I was working for Correctional Service Canada. I asked this guy from penitentiaries, they pay tons of money to just keep an inmate in the institution. Tons of money. I'm not here to give the numbers. It's not my business. But when you ask them, you don't even invest maybe a third or a quarter or anything of the money to invest in the community, but you prefer to tons of money to hold people in the institution. This is not taking the problem we have here, because we're losing them. We're losing them every single day. Even your own kids, you lose them every day. You see them. It's not their fault. It's not my fault. It's the system in general fault. Yeah.
Thank you. We have one last question, but I might want to take a stab at that. I interviewed a woman at the university a while ago. She's from Somalia. And she said, I have friends that try to be Somalian in Canada, and they're not happy. I have friends that try to be Canadian in Canada, and they're not happy. I have to disappoint everybody to be true to myself. And I thought that was a really interesting statement, because we can't go back, and we're always going to disappoint our parents, right? They want us to, they can always criticize our music and our clothes. But we have to take that spirit, the values, and try to live that in a modern way. And that's the intensely creative and courageous process that the kids at the borderline have to face. And it's they need the RCB, then the reflection, and the C is celebration and the building. And I think that's the challenge we have to do. And I think we have to have this space in Canada. And I like also what you said, it's not always embodied in the foods. Don't leave multiculturalism just with the food and the ceremonies. It's much more. It's a way of speaking, it's a way of being. And let's celebrate that and see that as a strength rather than as a threat. So I wanted to give Anush the last question here. You had your hand up.
I think he answered my question, but I want to say thank you for coming to our forum today. And I understand the cultural displacement and the lost heritage, and myself being a grandchild of the survivor of the genocide of the Armenians. I understand, and I also wanted to ask, I guess that's a question, what does justice mean to you? How do you define justice to somebody who has been through the Vietnamese trauma or Rwandan genocide and the native? What does justice mean to you, to each one of you?
And we have 30 seconds each.
Oh my gosh, that's a huge question. I haven't wrapped my brain around anything like that for a while. Okay, so for justice, for me, would be having First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people taking their rightful place in society, and front and center, and being acknowledged and respected. And like multiculturalism has to go beyond the food. It has to go into the workplace, into the schools. We have to be respected in our ways and our cultures. Like a wonderful judicial process in your trial, grassland trials. We have similar processes in the Aboriginal nations. And if we could actually put those to work in Canadian society, I think we'd all be much better off. Thank you.
Yeah, actually that question, no, I don't believe anybody can answer to that question. Because when you talk about justice, the big question would be justice to who? That's the real question. As this gentleman said, we're very proud to be in Canada. That's, I say it from the bottom of my heart. Why? Because I can just go in my house, lock the door and sleep. Because you know, around the world, many people do not even sleep. But from there and call that justice, to me is not justice. Justice should be starting, as I said, from your neighbor. You say hi, he say hi back to you, and you live in the same neighborhood, you share everything like everybody. Even if you go back in the past, even in the religious scenario, everything, you name it. But justice, it should be in economy, for example. We live in a society, capitalism is cruel here in North America. Or the wealth is held by 10% of the millions of people. From there, you're going to call justice. Where is the justice? If we take a guy who is a 60 billionaires like Trump we see around down here, he shared how many billions of dollars? Just divide him by, at least he's going to make millionaire, 1,000 of them one day. It's not happening because we're not socialist.
Well, there's certain political parties that would like to do that.
Yeah, justice is a good word to hear. It's like never again. When we talk about genocide, it's like never again. Have been meaningless since that word was created. Never again, when will be never again? Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for that Miss Universe question. I mean, to me, justice comes from a very small thing. If I say like, oh, hi, I'm an English teacher. English is my major. Please don't ask me, oh, really? Right? You say, oh, good for you, something like that. Oh, but you have an accent. You know what I mean? Like, do not negate others' achievement, and to me, celebration is very important. Or if you go to see, you know, a thick accent, it's like East Indian, for example. Oh, what's your job? Oh, I'm a doctor. Don't ask them really. Oh, with a thick accent, your customers wouldn't understand you. So I just think that justice comes from very small things like that. But in the larger sense, this is my wish. My wish that the Vietnam right now, personally for my Vietnamese people, that they will be communist-free, so that we can return to our country without losing so many rights, so that we can, you know, truly celebrate with what we have learned from Canada, from states, from all over the world, and share with them the journey that we have been, so that together we can, you know, move on the path and build our country to become a better one.
And for me, a just country would be one in which there'd be no differences between health indicators, that the level of social inequality wouldn't be there, that we would all suffer equally, we would all benefit equally, so that amongst the richest 1%, we would have a diversity reflective of our demographics, with people who are ill in hospital, the representation in prisons. When those things become equal, then I think we might have we'll always have people who have a gripe. We'll always have people who have something to complain about, or personal experiences that are unpleasant. But if we can look as a society and say, our prison population reflects our demographic mix. Our corporate boards, the boards that run our corporations, they have a mix that's like Canadian demographic. That might be a hint that we have a bit more of a just society. And how we get there is going to be something we can